What's up guys, hope everyone is doing well. In this video I'm going to be going over some updates for Bitcoin, but nonetheless to go ahead and get it started. First thing I want to go over here is this 12-hour chart. Again, most notably we have the purple zone here that I've been going over, with Bitcoin predominantly finding support all the way since around November 26th of last year at approximately 92, 93K. More recently, going back to the 13th, just a couple days ago, Bitcoin did have this flash pullback down to around approximately 89.2, although from that pullback, potentially at this point, obviously assuming Bitcoin can actually manage to knock out this local high here of around approximately 102K and then continue to go higher above this right now the all-time high. I think locally speaking, because I believe Bitcoin's going to go far higher than the 108K that is hit recently, going back to December of last year. So this purple zone is holding up very strong. Again, the base of this wavering upside price action that I had been talking about, going all the way back to November of last year, earlier mid-November. We see the 200 EMA here currently sits around 88.2, 88.3, so definitely could see Bitcoin come back down to that, especially if it can't manage to get above 102K and doesn't get rejected here at this vector zone at around 104.3K up to around 105.5K. There's also, again, this yellow zone here that I demonstrated in one of the recent videos as to how I got to this zone with creating some uptrends going back to around 49.50K low of the prior consolidation that Bitcoin had leading into this recent uptrend for Bitcoin. So definitely still always some more room for Bitcoin to retrace here. The more and more that it continues to come down and test this purple zone, even the yellow zone, the more likely it does become that it will eventually break through it, showing a lack of strength, especially because if it can't get above here at around 102, 103K and above here at around the 107, 108K range, then odds are it's probably going to continue to go lower. And I mean, Bitcoin at this point is only down at most around approximately 18%, and somewhere around 30 to 45% are it's typical for Bitcoin during bull markets. It's totally not out of the norm. So there's still plenty of room for Bitcoin to come lower. But right now, I'd say it looks fairly strong. Again, it's just very important to see Bitcoin get above around 100, really basically 103K, then the vector zone, like I said, that I mentioned, basically at 105K, then finally really getting above 108.5K would be best. Then pushing up to 110, 115, maybe even upwards towards 125K to 145K at highest for this next impulse for Bitcoin. Potentially this upcoming impulse for Bitcoin, assuming it has already locally bottomed out with this recent pullback here down to around 89K. Perhaps we'll see Bitcoin just have a straight shot uptrend up to the all-time high, which I think is going to be somewhere around 200 to 250K, or maybe we'll see a move up towards around 120, 145K at highest, see another, relatively lengthy, like perhaps a medium-term correction, healthy consolidation, then it'll move up towards that 200 to 250K range, perhaps even 300K, because there are some technical reasons to at least entertain and be open to the idea that Bitcoin will top out somewhere closer to 300K rather than 200 to 250K. Looking here at this 12-hour chart, I pointed out in a community post within the last week or so this potential triple bottom here. Looking something along these lines, I was pointing it out right here when Bitcoin was here, then ended up coming down a little bit further. At this point, I don't ultimately think it matters. If Bitcoin has already found its local low and it's currently in the midst of reversing back towards the upside, then it really doesn't matter what the pattern is. But what I find most interesting about this chart is the fact that looking here, there was a bullish engulfing candle. At this low, there's another bullish engulfing candle. At this low here, there's another bullish engulfing candle. And then here as well, there's also another bullish engulfing candle. Now, specifically this one right here, technically, if you zoom in really far, the close up here was, I believe, I'm not sure if it was, they're basically right at the exact same value. So you could suppose, rather than calling it a full-on, or like, at least like a strong bullish engulfing candle, it's kind of a watered down one, but nonetheless, clearly seeing these bullish engulfing candles at each of these four areas for this, boring, this sideways ranging just from approximately like around 90K all the way up to around 103K since December, late December of last year. Currently, Bitcoin has closed back above with the prior 12-hour candle, the orange range here. Right now, currently, it potentially looks similar to what happened back around here, with the candles looking quite similar in comparison between these two periods of time. So, as I was hinting at in the last chart, definitely could see Bitcoin perhaps come back down here towards the yellow to purple range along the 200 EMA and then get rejected and perhaps even go lower. 60K is the absolute, 60 to 65K to give range is the absolute bottom of the barrel. If it starts to go below 60K, if it closes like a at lowest 12-hour but mainly daily or higher candle below 60K, then I would have to start to say when and if that even comes, that more likely than not Bitcoin topped out for the bull market at around 108K. But for right now, especially with the way the fundamental landscape is shaping up, just in 5 days we have the inauguration in America for Donald Trump, the most pro-Bitcoin and just pro-crypto in general across the board, the most friendly to crypto administration that's ever been seen in America, with the many things I pointed out recently, with the potential proposal of a no capital gains tax for made in America or based in America cryptos, such as XRP, XYO, and others that I've gone over and talked about on this channel. Obviously, finally getting in some proper and positive, again, friendly regulation when it comes to cryptocurrencies and blockchain solutions that are going to be entirely, antithetical, polar opposite to people such as Gary Gensler during the last administration, people like Elizabeth Warren, and just how unbelievably unfriendly and just asininely absurd a lot of their propositions and in terms of the regulations were surrounding this. Really just trying to strip cryptocurrency, that being especially Bitcoin, of all of the freedom-based principles that it stands for in terms of giving financial, monetary power back to the citizen, in the sense of like the US dollar is just obviously, it's essentially an infinite supply. They've printed more, the American government has printed more of the dollar within the last, handful of years than the all of the time beforehand, which is just the fact that that's even a statistic that is legitimate is just honestly just leaves me speechless. But again, the fundamental landscape just looks fantastic heading into the rest of this year, over the next 4 years. Even Donald Trump, obviously, is one of the, him being very obviously business savvy, priding himself, one of the things of those being how good the stock market is doing, the NASDAQ, the Dow Jones, obviously with him acknowledging crypto and Bitcoin, etc., to the degree that he is now in his upcoming term. The well-being of the regulatory state of cryptocurrency Bitcoin and the positive nature of a bull market for Bitcoin continuing into the onset of his term is going to be something he's going to be talking about. And I actually believe he recently mentioned something about saying that Bitcoin will be somewhere around, upwards to 150K shortly into the upcoming 4 years that he will be serving as president and his administration will be doing. We all only hope. So far it looks that it could be great things, but obviously for those in the United States are interested in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, only hope that it will end up falling through to a positive degree that has been put out as proposals leading into the inauguration. If you look down here at the 12-hour, we can see there's a descending resistance on the RSI recently, seeing a resistance here as the price again is finding resistance, like I said, looking very perhaps eerily similar to around January 7th when Bitcoin went looked as if it was validating the W pattern that I pointed out here, but then it just got shot right back through. Now it's back up, but again, like I said, it looks relatively similar. And RSI is right now seeing rejection, although none of this necessitates that it's going to be rejected back down to around 90K or even lower. The MACD again also has crossed back above this resistance as well. If we take another resistance here, we can see that it's also slightly above this one as well. So again, all this could potentially be shaping up, especially again, just to bring it up because it can't really be overstated. And then over the next 5 days leading in through the inauguration on the 20th, we could see Bitcoin, a potential price route could be the Bitcoin is perhaps going to sit here for a little bit leading into the 20th, around the 20th, maybe the 21st, so coming up to around 108K. Maybe we see a pullback that scares people a little bit, comes back down, maybe even has a quick wick below 100K to something like this, and then for example, like maybe this is just a short term, like daily, 2-day, just a few day sell the news event around the 20th, and then we see Bitcoin continue to go higher with the as I was going on about earlier, the initiation of a very pro Bitcoin, pro crypto, and friendly administration. Look here at this daily chart. We can notice this uptrend here, this uptrend zone going all the way back to early September of 2024 when Bitcoin was setting its final local low after it had set this triple bottom here, leading into the beginning of the current impulse that it has been on so far, finding support here back, like I said, early September, mid-October, early November, and then currently finding support here as well. And also interesting, if we zoom all the way in here, we can see that the current not the current candle, but this candle that wicked all the way down to around 89K, which precisely down to the bottom, the lower bound, the lowermost trend line of this zone, which I find rather interesting. So far, obviously, Bitcoin has found a bounce back above and could potentially be, again, factoring in how that 12-hour chart looked, could potentially be seeing, at least, short term, assuming that it does see rejection, could end up getting rejected somewhere within this zone right here. Just around, basically 99.5K up to around like 102K or so. Now, again, there still could be the opportunity for this sort of, we could look at this as like a triple bottom, or we could just kind of fluidly, transition this out to kind of an ugly looking double bottom. But I mean, really, regardless of what the pattern is, if Bitcoin has found its local low and it's reversing upwards, it doesn't really matter what the pattern is, as long as it's going to continue to go upwards. We've also seen these decreasing volume vector candles peppered throughout here, as we saw here at the beginning of this this minor pullback leading into the sideways action after 108K here mid-December of last year. We saw these high volume vector candles. Ever since then, as we can see, Bitcoin's been trading sideways here within this range. We've seen these three here, here, and here. These three decreasing, in this context, volume vector candles peppered throughout this range, which could be indicating that like I said, the volume's decreasing, bearish in the bearish sense, and Bitcoin's about to move back towards the upside. If we look down here at this daily RSI, there's also this resistance. It's going to be important to get back above. It's also going to be quite notable and important to see Bitcoin, in terms of the RSI here, get back above around 66 to around 74 on the RSI, as you can see throughout this prior consolidation here. Once it began, the RSI was just continuing to get suppressed by this yellow zone, and then finally, at the beginning of this impulse here, finally broke above, and then that's when Bitcoin went back above 75K here back around early November of last year. So that's going to be very important to see. Also, somewhat, I think, correlative, well, definitely correlative, but whether or not it'll coincide with it in time is getting back above this trend zone here. As we can see that there was this beginning in this initiatory impulse. Finally, the volume towards the upside started to doubt here. went above this trend, continued to hold it till it got to 108K. So far it's gotten above it. So Bitcoin coming back up to this, maybe seeing a short-term rejection, then getting back above this and continuing to go higher. It's going to be quite important, I believe. Now, if we zoom out and look at each of these vertical blue, these turquoise zones, these are lining up with where the beginning is the presidential election and then the end is the inauguration. Now, as I've already gone over, the presidential elections for Bitcoin have been bullish since 2012. You can see here the presidential election leading into the inauguration, Bitcoin only went up and then went parabolic. Here in 2016 to 17, you can see, zooming in again, the presidential election here was bullish, went up, and then there was this correction towards the end leading into the inauguration, which could be very similar to what we've been seeing recently. If you look here in 2020 to 2021, you can see again here at the presidential election, just nothing but bullish was going into its parabolic stage towards and leading into the inauguration. You can see that it was Bitcoin's correcting from 42K all the way down to 28,000. This was a 32% move. If we go back to 2016 to 2017, this was a 35% move. 2012 didn't really have a pullback. So, I mean, 30 to 35% moves historically have been related. So, I mean, if that happens somewhat similar again, we could see anywhere from around 75,000 all the way down to around 70,000. Maybe we've been looking down around like 69, 68K. That would line up with this lowermost vector zone here, which could potentially, again, I mean, that's definitely possible. It wouldn't go below the bottom of the barrel, you know, $60,000 targets towards the downside, which would coincide with the 45% pullback, which would start to enter, basically, historically speaking, bear mode or bear market territory. Now, if we look here at the MACD, we can also point out, again, very similar to the RSI, we saw the MACD was suppressed above this green line here all the way up until the recent move towards 108K. You can also notice that there is a bullish divergence, a subtle one. It's really an exaggerated, well, actually, I guess there technically isn't one. I suppose you could still say it's kind of a muted, exaggerated, watered down bullish divergence, but this will be important to see as long as we can see if we see the RSI start to break the resistance here, moving above this zone, while the MACD is doing the same thing with its respective values, as we see the price breaking 108K with volume support, that's going to be very good. The last thing I want to point out here is you can see that the price here for Bitcoin is sitting right and has been trading right within the 50 EMA and its band. If we go back to, again, leading into the inauguration of 2021, we can see that when Bitcoin retraced here from 42 down to around 29,000 approximately, it's also found support along the 50 EMA in its band. This is also going to be very similar to the same time period back here as well. For this, it went a little bit below the 50 EMA, but ultimately it's found support along the 50 EMA. It also will be somewhat comparable to the very latter portion of the 2016 to 17 bull market, where we saw, I mean, really the entire time this 50 EMA band was quite, you know, good support. I mean, there were these instances, like I said, here, very minorly here, where it did go below the 50 EMA and its band briefly, but ultimately the 50 EMA band was continuing to attract it back upwards when it did go below it. There was also this portion back here in 2017 in November where it came right back down to it, bounced up for this final blow off top, leading to around 19 to 20K. So, I mean, historically speaking, we're seeing a lot of similarities, which could end up repeating and rhyming, which Bitcoin appears to have a tendency to do. Now, lastly, we look here at this weekly chart. The indicators on here are going to be the Pi cycle high indicator, which I've gone over many times on the channel recently. We're going to have the RSI. There's obviously the vector candles here. We see the black high volume vector candles, the white high volume vector candles, the black being the bearish, the white being the bullish. We'll see the yellow vector candles here, the increasing bullish volume. Those are very good to catch in the lows. If you see those printing in the lows, especially after like 50, 60, 70% retracements, or like, you know, 30 to 20 to 40% retracements in bull markets, seeing those in the lows are going to be very opportune in terms of catching them to ride the next upswing. Also, we have again the increasing in this context here, this purple vector volume, or this purple vector candle, the increasing volume, given that it's at the beginning of a bull market, is an increasing, or my bad, the beginning of a bear market in this context is an increasing bearish volume candle, implying that the bear market is beginning, that the volume will start to pick up, very similar to the one we saw here as well, leading into the March crash. Here we also have the RSI candles as well, which are these turquoise candles and these hot pink candles, where every time the RSI gets to certain oversold regions, which you can see goes all the way back to like here at the low of November 2011. Once these RSI vector candles beginning here start to print, typically that signifies that the bull market is on its way. We saw the vectors, or rather the RSI candles printed here towards the lows of 2014 to 15. We saw the first RSI candle here printed in November of 2015. Very good indicator for the beginning of this bull market. Again, I mean, it's just the same thing we'll see here for each phase, each cycle, each iteration in Bitcoin's price history. Again, oversold candles, or my bad, yeah, oversold candles, overbought candles here. Again, we saw one for the March crash here for the full-on parabolic beginning of the most recent bull market here. Again, saw the same thing here for this bear market, 2022. And then recently with the current bull market here, as you can see, beginning when Bitcoin was pushing towards 34, 35K. Once we start to see these print once again, that'll likely be a pretty good confirmation that Bitcoin is entering into the next impulse and what I believe will be the final impulse. There's also an indicator on here that I haven't gone over before, which you can see here is going to be this kind of wave-like structure, with the purple being in all-time high territory, the blue here being in all-time low territory. We have kind of a median with this black line here, and then this white line that spans the price, kind of cutting right through the middle is the power law. This is an indicator I found recently. You know, the Bitcoin wave rainbow indicator, I think is very interesting to use, especially if you pair it with the vector candles, the RSI candles, and the pi cycle indicator. Because, I mean, going back to 2011, you see nicely all-time high happened in that area. Same thing for 2013 here. We see for 2017. We saw it here for 2021. And I believe that we'll see it again here for 2025. It, again, is really pointing towards around 190K, upwards towards like 270K, which further affirms the ranges and the range, really, to generalize it, that I've been giving for many, many months at this point for the upcoming all-time high for Bitcoin. And it also further validates the upcoming bear market low, going down to, I think we could see potentially some wicks down around approximately 50K at lowest, but anywhere from around 50 to 70K is where I think Bitcoin's going to bottom out during the next bear market. And this also further affirms that as well. There is some sort of a difference though, because it's putting the next all-time high after the upcoming one for Bitcoin, putting it somewhere around 2029, anywhere from around 500 to around 650K. The time frame lines up. I do think we'll see Bitcoin top out somewhere around 2030, and I think it's quite likely given the decay factor, in the sense that Bitcoin, its phases and its cycles are extending. They're taking longer to play out over time because Bitcoin's aging. It's just getting older. I mean, you can just analogize it in the senses, you know, the human body, whenever it gets older, you know, it's going to take you longer to perform certain laborious tasks because your body's just older. You don't really have the same amount of energy input as a 60-year-old, 70-year-old as you did when you're, you know, 20, 15 to 20, 30 years old. It's just obviously there's that, your body's decaying, you're getting older. And a very similar situation here for Bitcoin as well. So like I said, the time frame is relatively the same. I mean, I think anywhere from around 2030 to 2033 is where we'll see Bitcoin top out. Not somewhere around, as this purple zone here is pointing out, around 500 to 650K. I think it's more likely to go towards 1 million to around like 1.4 million as a range. But I mean, really, I honestly, with a lot of the extrapolations and the projections I've been doing with Bitcoin recently, I mean, I think its potential, for example, if you look here at 2033, which would be so obviously this is going to be the upcoming all-time high, but this Bitcoin wave rainbow wave indicator has putting an all-time here that doesn't match up with where my, like I said, it lines up in time, but it doesn't line up with price target. And then there's also this all-time high here, which lines up with the price target of around 1 million towards 1.4 million, like almost precisely lines up with what I've been seeing. And it also lands somewhere around 2033. So let's just, for the circumstances here, hypothetically speaking, assume that my extrapolation and projection is going to be what follows in suit more so than, for example, Bitcoin comes up here, comes back down, obviously sets all-time highs and all-time lows like that. If my scenario ends up playing out, then we'll see something along these lines, and we'll just see a very long drawn-out bull market, something along, well, obviously bear market here leading into the bull market, which would then, for those of you aware of my channel and the phase cycle framework or the epic framework that I've gone over in this channel, where we see with Bitcoin having back here, this would be phase 1 leading into the 2013 all-time high. Phase 1 ends here. Phase 2 begins here, and this entire price action here is phase 2. Phase 2 ends here, then phase 1 just picks back up again. We see the W, the characteristic W of phase 1. Again, we see it back here. So we see it again appear here. Then we see this bull market, which is synonymous to this bull market back here. Ultimately, fundamentally, they're the same kind of A, B, C, D lightning bolt-like pattern. Like I said, also factoring in some degree of decay in terms of the lengthening of the phases and the cycles, the bull markets being less bullish and the bear markets being less bearish over time. So once the current phase 1 of cycle 3 for Bitcoin ends here sometime roughly maybe, let's say 4 to 6, 7 months into this year, somewhere around 250K. This will culminate phase 1 right here in this area. Then we'll begin the third iteration of phase 2, which again looks like this. So what I think is, according to this framework, most likely within its contextualization, that Bitcoin is going to top out somewhere right here, and we'll see a very long-term, drawn-out variant version of this bear market and the bull market, where it's just going to look like really kind of like just a long valley. We'll see a dip into the trough of the valley, then we'll see the mountains start to pick back up, leading into a new mountain peak essentially. Although, this has made me rethink my own framework a bit, because obviously it's been accurate. Going all the way back to 2011, as I said, 2013, 17, 2021. Now, the person who made this indicator, Leo Hart, you can find him on Twitter or X, comes across as a very open-minded individual, pointing out how all models get broken. Theories, a lot of the time, especially with market and technical analysis, is very open-minded to the fact that even his model, as we see here, obviously more likely than not will be broken to some degree into the future. But so far, obviously, as you can see and as I've demonstrated, it's been very accurate so far. So I'm very curious as the rest of this decade plays out, leading into 2030, leading into 2030, 33, 34, 35, seeing how this ends up playing out, whether or not we'll see the price of Bitcoin follow what you see here with this wave pattern ascending in a logarithmic fashion towards the top, or if we'll see the picture that I painted play out, where we'll see Bitcoin come up to here, which agrees right now. Myself and this indicator and the maker of it would agree, I'd assume, on most of the context surrounding this, whereas I assume we might differ. Obviously, according to this indicator, I'm sure, just picking up on how he seems to be conveying himself online on X, seems to be quite open-minded and entertaining of people using his indicator and giving their own opinions on how Bitcoin could trade and what price route it could take over the next few years leading into the end of this current decade. But really, the last thing I want to say is going off of the idea of Bitcoin lengthening over time, whereas you can see this W back here of phase 1 of cycle 2. I don't know why. Whenever I try to click any tools with this toolbar down here, it just doesn't want to click it on TradingView. It's the most frustrating thing ever. But we see this W here for phase 1 back in 2012, 2011, 2012. And clearly this was just a short W. I mean, it was only roughly, let's just say 40 to 45, 50 bars at most long. And the second W here, back to around the same time frame, is over double that. So, I mean, assuming that according to what Bitcoin appears to be doing as it evolves over time, this entire bear to bull market right here, phase 2 of cycle 2, is going to be significantly lengthened. And a lot of the, which I don't have it demonstrated here on this chart, but a lot of the ratios and other mathematical calculations I've done to try to extrapolate a potential end date, I mean, could even potentially push the all-time high after the upcoming one in this year towards sometime in the 2040s, like mid 2040s, maybe even to 2046. Now, I just have a hard time wrapping my mind around seeing, I mean, really, if I kind of paint it out right here, I have to go to a higher time frame. Go to the 2 weekly. I mean, let's see here. I mean, if we just kind of stick to the whole idea of, let's say 2040 is around right here. I mean, so 1.4 is going to be around here, down to 1 million. So, I mean, let's say Bitcoin comes up, tops out something along these lines, and then it just enters the most long, drawn-out bear to bull market period ever. And it looks something along these lines. Now, zooming out and looking at something like that, I mean, it looks kind of wonky and wacky to me a little bit. Clearly doesn't appear to be following this power law as well, which I don't necessarily, I mean, obviously I'm not, I think the power law, the whole power law theory put forward by Giovanni Santostasi, or Santostasi, I think it's Santostasi. I believe his theory is quite grounded in solid scientific analysis and concepts such as scale invariance and fractality, periodicity is associated with this. Obviously recursivity being associated with all this as well, and self-similarity. I think all of it's very heavily grounded in science and in valid concepts. But I mean, especially like I said, is when it comes to technical analysis, when it comes to the market and assets, especially with human psychology being factored into it, even something as scientifically and logically, mathematically grounded as something like power laws and how they appear in nature through many, many different natural phenomena. I mean, I still at least am open-minded and entertained to the fact that it could be broken in the future. But that wraps up everything I wanted to go over in this video. So as always, none of this is meant to be financial advice. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Ooh, I'm now, won't die. See you forever, such a long